6 months ago, the Taliban took back power in Afghanistan. Images of panic and chaos at the Kabul airport made headlines around the world as thousands attempted to flee the country. The militant group had promised a softer version of governance than the last time it ruled between 1996 and 2001, vowing to allow life to return to normal after 20 years of war. Well, to see how it's all panned out, our foreign affairs editor, Turle, joins me here on set. So, Philip, 6 months on, what does life in Afghanistan under the Taliban look like this time around?
Well, if you look back to the first time they were in power, there are memories of public floggings, of executions also in public. We haven't seen that this time round. The Taliban has said that they do not resemble the former regime that was chased from power by the Americans after the attacks on the World Trade Center in New York in September 2001. But what there is in Afghanistan today is a climate of fear for all those who are members of the former government, the former internationally recognized government that collapsed after the withdrawal of American forces last August. There is also fear amongst the press, amongst journalists, that they can't say what they want. There is press there, but it's very, very heavily controlled. And of course, I'll come back to that in a minute, the situation concerning women in Afghanistan. But above all, there is a problem as far as the everyday lives of people are concerned. And hunger is the major concern, because the financial tap has been turned off since the Taliban took power from the World Bank, from the United States, from financial institutions. So we've got to a point now where 55% are facing acute food shortages. That's an increase of 37% since last August, and up to 1 million people are facing imminent famine in Afghanistan. This has all been exacerbated by a drought in the country, which has made growing crops extremely difficult. And also, as I was saying, the financial crisis because of the fact there's no money coming into the country from other institutions. So 97% of Afghans are now affected by poverty, and the universal poverty level is expected to increase even further by the middle of this year. 90% of health clinics around the country are also expected to close. So the situation for the average man and woman in Afghanistan is extremely difficult, even dire, and they are crying out for international aid. But that international aid is not coming, because what the international governments want to do is to put pressure on the Taliban to either leave power or to introduce reforms to make an inclusive government and not a government that discriminates against sectors of society.
And Philip, has that worked? Has cutting off the tap done anything to change the Taliban's governance?
Well, to be honest, not for the moment. The Taliban are, let's say, a little bit more open-minded because they need the money. There is a question over, well, if they had the money, would they then become a highly repressive regime? And we see these public floggings and executions. That's something the international community says it will not stand for. So there is a lot of concern about what would happen if they did get these funds, notably over the position of women in Afghan society. Access to university for women is extremely difficult. They have been banned from having public employment, for example. Many female teachers have been sacked in Afghanistan. That has posed a big problem for students, because students, if they're female students, have to be taught by another woman and cannot be taught by a man. So obviously there are not enough female teachers around to be able to do that. And 87% in figures put forward by human rights groups, 87% of Afghan women are suspected of suffering from domestic abuse, because there's no control over that. And many Afghan women now don't dare to go out in the street because they feel like they're not welcome. So there is a lot of concern over this, the future of women. And that is one of the issues that the international community is putting its foot down over, and saying that if that doesn't improve, then the money that the Taliban so desperately needs will not be forthcoming.
And that's linked, Philip, perhaps to a third question, which is it possible for the international community to work out any type of viable deal with the Taliban?
Well, there have been meetings between the Taliban and officials last year. In October, there was a meeting between the Americans and a group of Taliban that was in Qatar. The Americans said, we are not recognizing the Taliban, but what we're calling for is the respect of all Afghans and human rights. And there was another meeting in January this year in Oslo between European officials, Norway, France and Britain, to underline also the pressure on the Taliban to reform the country and include all sectors of society in government. They said also they were not willing to recognize the Taliban regime. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for the unblocking of funds to the Taliban, but so far that hasn't happened either. So what the international community really wants is four different things: the rights to all girls to education, an end to human rights abuses, all schools being allowed to operate normally, and the international community compelling the Taliban to make real concessions. So there is a chink of light. There are some protests by women which have not been too badly suppressed by the Taliban, but there is still a long way to go, 6 months into their regime. So the situation is looking very, very bad for most Afghans as the drought continues and there is no sign of financial help coming from the international community for the time being.
And with just 6 months in power, Philip, surely not a reassuring picture of Afghanistan. We'll have to keep it there for now. Philip Turle, thank you for that update about Afghanistan.